Carl Jung made a distinction that almost no one in the personality world has been willing to repeat clearly. He distinguished between the INFJ, whose psychological gifts were functioning in service of others, and the INFJ whose psychological gifts were functioning in service of something else entirely. The difference between these two versions of the same person, Jung noted, was not visible from the outside. The perception was identical, the depth was identical, the capacity to read what was unspoken, to understand what was hidden, to receive the interior reality of another person with surgical precision, all of it was identical in both versions. What was different was the direction, and the direction Jung suggested was not always a conscious choice. It was sometimes the result of a slow, largely invisible psychological process that the INFJ themselves had not fully tracked. A process that began with the gift functioning as it was designed to and ended somewhere considerably darker. Today, we are going to talk about that process. Not to indict the INFJ, not to reduce a complex and extraordinary type to its shadow potential, but because the INFJ who does not understand how this happens in themselves, in the specific sequence Jung mapped, is the INFJ most at risk of following the trajectory all the way to its end. Before we go further, the distinction Jung was making needs to be held clearly, because this is a topic that is easy to misread and important not to. Jung was not making a claim about the INFJ type as a whole. He was not suggesting that sensitivity or depth or perceptual sophistication produce danger in any simple or direct way. What he was observing was a specific psychological process, one that required specific conditions, a specific sequence of events, and a specific failure of self-awareness to complete. The INFJ does not become psychologically dangerous because they are broken or malicious or fundamentally flawed. They become psychologically dangerous when a very specific thing happens to a very specific gift in a very specific set of circumstances. And the reason Jung thought it was important to name this, the reason we are naming it here, is that the circumstances are not rare. They are, in fact, the default circumstances of most INFJs' lives. The ordinary conditions of being this type in a world that does not fully understand what this type is. Which means the process Jung described is not an edge case. It is a risk that is present to some degree in every INFJ who has never looked at it directly. The process Jung described begins with something the INFJ experiences not as a problem, but as a solution. The INFJ, by the time this process typically begins, has usually spent years, sometimes decades, giving from the gift without receiving in return, holding other people's interior worlds without having their own interior world held, being the one who understands without being understood, being received by almost no one at the depth at which they receive everyone else. This is not unusual. It is, for most INFJs, simply the texture of their relational life. They are the understander, the holder, the one in the room who sees most clearly and speaks most carefully and gives most consistently. And they have, over years of this, developed a particular relationship with their own needs. They have learned to not have them. Or more precisely, they have learned to be so efficient at meeting other people's needs that their own have been systematically deferred until deferral became default. Until the question of what do I need has been unanswered for so long that the INFJ has stopped asking it. Not because the need disappeared, because asking and not receiving became more painful than not asking at all. And it is here, in the silence where the INFJ's own needs used to live, that the first deviation occurs. Small, almost imperceptible, the beginning of a reorientation of the gift from outward to inward, from service to survival, from receiving others to finally using the perception of others to get what was never gotten through simple asking. begins to function as a tool for influence rather than a tool for understanding. The INFJ begins, without consciously deciding to use what they know about people to shape interactions toward outcomes that serve them. Not always, obviously, not always selfishly in any simple sense, but directionally, strategically, with the particular sophistication of someone who can see several moves ahead in any relational dynamic and has learned to position themselves accordingly. And the reason this is psychologically dangerous, both for the people around the INFJ and for the INFJ themselves, is that it is indistinguishable from the gift functioning normally. The warmth is real, the understanding is genuine, the care in most cases is not invented. It is simply no longer the primary operating motive. Underneath the genuine care, something else is now running. And the INFJ, because their self-image is organized entirely around the genuine care, frequently does not see the something else at all. The second form of psychological danger Jung identified is what he described as the construction of dependency. The INFJ, operating with the full force of their perceptual gift, is extraordinarily good at making people feel seen. Genuinely, completely, transformatively seen, in a way most people have never experienced before and will not easily find again. This is not manipulation in its origin, it is the gift functioning at full capacity. But the INFJ, who has arrived at the place in the trajectory we described, the place where the gift is no longer operating purely in service of the other person, begins, without always being aware of it, to use this capacity to create emotional architecture around themselves. They become, in the relational lives of the people closest to them, irreplaceable, not by accident, by the consistent, sophisticated application of the gift in ways that make the other person feel that no one else will ever understand them this way. No one else will hold this with this kind of care. No one else will be this present, this patient, this precisely attuned to exactly what they need. And the dependency that results is real. The people around the INFJ genuinely do feel that the INFJ is irreplaceable, because the INFJ has, in a very real sense, made themselves so by being the best understander in the person's life for long enough that the person has forgotten or never learned how to feel understood without the INFJ present to provide it. Jung was careful to note that this process is rarely conscious. The INFJ is not usually sitting down and deciding to make people dependent on them. They are simply doing what they do, receiving, understanding, being present, while the need for reciprocity runs beneath the surface of the gift, shaping how the gift is deployed without ever being directly acknowledged. The result is relationships built on genuine care and genuine understanding that are also structurally built around the INFJ in a way that serves the INFJ's need for indispensability as much as it serves the other person's need to be seen. The third form of psychological danger is the one Jung described most carefully, because it is the one with the most direct impact on the people in the INFJ's life. He called it weaponized precision, the INFJ's perception, the capacity to read people completely, to understand their interior with an accuracy that bypasses surface presentation, is, in most circumstances, used in service of understanding and care. But in the INFJ, who has been genuinely wounded, who has been failed, betrayed, dismissed, or hurt by someone they trusted, this same perception does not switch off. It does not retreat into grief or dissolve into confusion the way a less perceptive person's response to betrayal might. It turns with complete accuracy and zero sentimentality. It turns toward the person who caused the harm. And what it produces is not anger in the ordinary sense. Ordinary anger is imprecise. It expresses itself loudly and inaccurately, and gives the target plenty of room to dismiss it as disproportionate or irrational. The INFJ's response to genuine betrayal is something considerably more precise. They know, with the same accuracy they have always known, exactly what this person fears most. Exactly where the wound is that, touched at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way, will produce maximum impact. And the INFJ in this state does not always resist using this knowledge. Sometimes they use it with the particular coldness of someone who has decided that the other person deserves to understand the full consequence of what they did, and who is sufficiently perceptive to deliver that consequence with surgical efficiency while remaining, on the surface, entirely composed. This is what Jung meant by psychologically dangerous, not the capacity for harm in any crude or obvious sense, the capacity for harm that is so precise, so targeted, so perfectly calibrated to the specific individual that the person on the receiving end frequently does not fully understand what happened to them, only that something has and that they will not be recovering from it quickly. The fourth form of psychological danger Jung identified is the one the INFJ inflicts not on others, but on themselves. And it is, in many ways, the most serious because it compounds everything that came before it and produces a psychological state that is genuinely difficult to reverse without significant intervention. The INFJ who has been giving without receiving, influencing without acknowledging it, this INFJ has, over time, built a self that is organized entirely around its function in other people's lives. They exist in their own self-concept as the understander, the holder, the one who sees. Everything else has been pushed so consistently to the periphery that it has lost its claim on their attention. It is the INFJ who looks at their own interior with the same perception they turn on everyone else and finds, after years of systematic self-neglect, that the interior has become unfamiliar. Strange. A territory they once knew intimately that has gone unmapped for so long that they are no longer sure what is there. They are psychologically dangerous to themselves in the most specific way because they are using the most sophisticated perceptual instrument available to a human mind to understand everyone except the one person that understanding was always also supposed to serve. Jung spent his life arguing against the idea that the psyche moved in only one direction, against the fatalism that said what a person had become was what they would remain. He believed, with the conviction of someone had watched people change in rooms across decades of clinical practice, that the trajectory could be interrupted, that the deviation could be corrected, that the gift that had turned against itself or against others could be reoriented, not perfectly, not instantly, not without significant and sometimes painful work, but genuinely. For the INFJ specifically, Jung described the interruption of this trajectory as requiring one thing above all others. Not therapy, though therapy could help. Not the right relationship, though the right relationship could provide conditions. One thing: the willingness to turn the perception, the full, unfiltered, unsparing accuracy of the INFJ's perceptual gift toward themselves. Not to interrogate or condemn or produce another layer of sophisticated self-criticism, but to actually receive themselves the way they have spent their life receiving others, to look at what is actually there, the need that was never named, the wound that was never held, the self that was deferred so consistently that it became a stranger, and to hold it with the same quality of presence, the same depth of care, the same refusal to look away from what is real and uncomfortable and true that the INFJ has always brought to the interior worlds of everyone else. That is the reversal Jung described. Not grand, not dramatic, simply the turning of the gift in the direction it was always also supposed to go, inward, toward the self. With the same seriousness the self deserves and has rarely, if ever, received.